Welcome to our podcast, We're Not So Different.
I'm Samira.
And I'm Ali. We're two professionals having real conversations about our experiences at home, work, and out in the community.
We tell our stories through the lens of our different backgrounds to just find out that we're not so different.
In our podcast, we'll explore ways that we can improve engagement and bridge social gaps while trying to find the humor in it all.
Check us out on social media at WNS Different or email us at wnsdifferent@gmail.com.
Our topic for today is I'm Not What You See on TV. So we hope in this episode to cover things such as how environment and external forces shape cultural perceptions. How does the media represent us, meaning all of us? And do we use anecdotal evidence in our daily lives to support self-fulfilling stereotypes or perceptions about other groups of people? So I guess I'll kick this one off. I'm not what you see on TV. So one thing that I would say is, does environment and external forces shape cultural perceptions? 100%. Right? I think we all can say that things that we see on TV or in media can definitely shape our perceptions of other people. And I want to caveat this, though, by saying the less exposure that someone has to a group, the more likely they are to take their notes or their thoughts from television, from information, right? If you think about cultures that are, halfway around the world, if their only view of African Americans, for example, is what they've seen on Martin and In Living Color, then they have a very specific viewpoint, right? Outside of athletes, right? So everyone that comes over there that's over 6 foot tall must be a black basketball player, from people that I know that have visited China, for example, right?
Well, they don't even have to visit China, just here in the United States. Like, my son is, I think he's 6'3", and he has been 6'3" for a very long time. And he's just turned 18, so, I mean, he's been 6'2", 6'3" since he was 16, 17 years old. But he's always been tall, and everyone's first question is always, do you play football? Because he's not just tall, he's broad and like a wall. So here as well, you're big, you're strong looking, and he's also black. So are you an athlete? And I always say, no, he's an artist. And they're like, oh, well, that's different.
Right, yeah. And that's true. It's funny that the response you get is, oh, that's different. And because that's the common perception, right? But part of that perception when we talk about media is that's how we are portrayed, right? That the black guy is the athlete, right? So if there's scenes at a park playing basketball, there's black guys out there playing basketball or football, or the sports themselves are pushed, or the communities in where these folks grew up, they push athleticism, right? Because that's part of that is just, well, this is your way out, right? It's not education. This is your way out. So we're going to stuff the football pipeline and the basketball pipeline with as many, black kids as we can possibly find, right?
Is it also fair to say, and this is a very big stereotype that I'm going to say, but I'm going to say it anyways. Is it also fair to say that in general, the black people tend to be better athletes than other cultures?
Without a doubt. So this is where it's interesting because, part of media is what part does history play in how you're perceived, right? What part of history, what part does history play in what you actually do, right? So, and I know this would be one of those things like, oh, we always got to go back to slavery sort of thing, right? But, facts are facts. So for us in this country, part of what existed before slavery was the slavery of Native Americans, right? And because physically it was too much of a burden, they moved to enslaving Africans. So they tried to enslave the native populations here in the Americas, and that's been well documented, right? Even the southern western hemisphere they did. Even after they started using Africans, they bred us. right? Like it wasn't like accidental, like, oh, if you procreate, whatever. No, it was actual, I'm going to take a African male or post-African male slave from this plantation and send him to another plantation to breed with a woman there because he's one of my strongest bucks, which is a term they used to use, right? They used to call African slave the men bucks.
Wow.
100%.
Like a deer?
Like a deer, right? So when you think about now when they use the term prize buck, they're talking about the alpha male deer with the biggest antlers, the biggest shoulders, the biggest neck, right?
Yeah.
For trophy hunters.
Yeah.
So, and there is documentation that supports in Florida, there were places that they had set up where they actually bred, right? They actually bred young bucks and young, I guess at this point, African American women, right? And when they talked about that in some of the writings, they would talk about a fertile young, African woman of 22, 23 years of age, fertile. She can be, so they talked about you in a form of chattel, right? Like they would a horse, right? Or they would a cow or a bull or what have you, right?
Yeah.
They do that practice now with animals. So you fast forward that the system has pushed you through 250 years of slavery to be the strongest, the most physically dominant, to produce all of this stuff through manual labor. You carry it forward, right, after, once you get into sports and that sort of thing, right, you fast forward to today, that's part of it is breeding, right? Because I'm sure you can go to other parts of the world where there are other people of color or dark-skinned folks that have not been bred the way folks have been bred here, and their body types are slightly different, right? And of course, you can factor in a little bit of interracial marriages and interracial children, but if you breed a group of people a certain way, then that's it. Just like if you go to China, people are very slight, right? They're very thin.
Oh, are they bred that way?
I'm not saying that they're bred. No. Let's be clear. They're not bred that way. I'm saying, but if you take a group from a different part of the country, right, and then you just focus solely on a different part of the world, and you focus solely on breeding just the biggest, the best, the brightest, or what have you, you can over time change that,
create that,
right? You can create strong, healthy, physically dominant folks. So, So to your point, yes, I agree. A long explanation to say that I agree with you on that is what we've pushed towards, but it's just that the physical nature of what we do, right? What we did then and now it kind of has similarities, right?
So would you say, and this is a generalization, that there's a lot of truth behind stereotypes as well?
It depends on which ones,
okay,
right? So I think if you say that all black folks are athletes, that's not true. Just like if you were to say, well, all white men are doctors, right? Or all white men are lawyers. You could
say that about Iranians or Indians or
exactly,
the Middle Eastern culture,
now,
Asian culture.
Right now in the Bay Area. Oh, well,
I'm joking.
No, but you can though, because so here's one thing. Let's flip it over to a career aspect, right? Because they've done these, where they do the cultural bias, right? Where they flash the photos of who's the person that works in the accounting department, and they'll show an Asian male with glasses on, and then they'll show, like a punk rock looking white chick, right? And your mind immediately says, oh, well, it's got to be the Asian guy, right, with the glasses. When I was growing up in the 90s, right, what was always presented to us? Well, Asians are good at math.
Sure, yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
When you go to an accounting department, the ones that I've worked in, right, at multiple different companies, there are a lot of Asians in accounting.
Okay.
Are they better at math? I can unequivocally tell you no, they are not. Based on experience, right?
No biases.
Right. No biases there. That's just fact, right? And if you take pieces, right?
Not to say that they're not.
No, exactly.
But it's not, you can't generalize.
You cannot generalize like that, right? There are people that go to the upper echelon of intelligence in every group.
Yeah.
And there are people that you can find in these same groups that are at the bottom echelon of intelligence.
Right.
Because I knew a couple Asian dudes growing up that probably couldn't add 2 + 2.
Right.
And then I know some that were very intelligent and majored in statistics and math and whatnot. So, so I think that stereotypes are a scary, scary thing because there are always outliers. Right. And it could depend on where you grew up and where you go. It's easy to say that. Like if you say, oh, well, I live in an area where it's the worst part of the inner city and there's a bunch of black kids there and nobody wants to go to school. It's easy to say that. But if you go to the suburb area of a place that's populated heavily by African Americans, maybe in Atlanta or in Chicago or in DC or in Philly, it doesn't hold water. Right. So I think sometimes stereotypes, and that's why, we want to touch on the self-fulfilling prophecy piece of it, is because you can say, well, this is the stereotype I believe. Therefore, I'm going to look for that specific self-fulfilling thing. Do you really think Obama is the only black man capable of being president? You got to be kidding me.
No.
You know what I mean? Like how many intelligent black men do I know, do you know, where you can say like, yeah, I mean, compared to other presidents, and I'll leave them unnamed, you got to be kidding me, right?
Oh, absolutely. Several presidents, not just current ones.
We can pick several out of the 45, or 44. Excuse me, out of the 44.
Isn't he 45?
Obama was the 44, so we're at 45 now. So there are 44 non-black, right?
Correct, yes. Yeah. Out of the 44 non-black.
So what about for you, though? Like, what is the stereotype for Iranian, right? Other than people hearing about, like, oh, I know they're over there and they're selling oil and they don't do this and they don't get along with us and they have weapons of mass destruction and we don't think they should have it. And
yeah, well, that's not true. We don't. But I think if I look at it at different stages of my life, it's evolved, right? So when I was younger, there really wasn't any representation of an Iranian, or if you want to group me in with like Arabs as well. We didn't have a lot of representation outside of the terrorist.
You were the middle.
The hostage hold. I remember watching a movie where they were like taking over a plane. They were Arab and things like that.
Because people just look at it as the Middle East, right?
They don't look at it.
You're Middle Eastern, so that's
Eastern.
all of you.
Yeah, you're all Arab. We're all Arab.
Exactly.
And we're very different. We have different languages. Our origins are different, but and we actually, technically don't get along. It's one of those things where it's like, different people within the same minority group that don't get along. Like, for example, in the Latino community, if you call a Colombian, ask a Colombian if they're Mexican, they might be like, what? And I get it, because it's like, it's not to be, I mean, they might mean it that way, but it's just that's not who I am.
Correct.
Right? And just because I look that way, please don't classify me that way.
Correct.
This country and that country is different, right?
Yeah, ask me
it's one of those things. So as a kid, there was a lot of, I was called a sand knitter, I was called a camel jockey, things like that. And, I don't look traditionally Middle Eastern, but my name is very Middle Eastern.
Yeah.
So, and I was very proud of being Iranian. So I was like, yeah, I'm Iranian. Anytime we did a country project, it was Iran. Or I was, quick to volunteer to do any of those things. So as a kid, it was more, our perception was, we were terrorists or we had oil money, which I did not. I had neither of those things. I grew up on the west side.
Right, talking about a stereotype you wish was true.
Right, exactly. Then as I grew up and, Clueless came out. Did you watch Clueless?
Of course not, but I'm familiar with it.
Okay. So they had the Persian Mafia in Clueless.
Oh, really?
Right.
Oh,
and they all owned BMWs, and it was very LA Persian LA. And so when that came out, there was like a little different, like we were like pretentious and like, all made up and things like that.
And it's funny how that immediately changed it. Right, because that was their experience.
My generation,
outside of
right?
Yeah, of course.
The older generation, I think they were still very much, you're a terrorist.
Right, right.
You're a terrorist. You hate us.
But that's a
oppressed.
good point. That's a good point to call out. And I just want to pause for a second because in your area, in your age group, that movie influenced what people who did not necessarily know things that aren't taught in school, what they thought about you, because they knew that you were Iranian. So they knew this whole time, but then Clueless comes out and says, here's a Persian mafia and everybody has BMWs and oil money and they're pretentious. Now all of a sudden, oh, well, you must be that to some degree, or now I'm going to look for that in you. Right.
Then fast forward a little bit, and there was the House of Sand and Fog that came out, and some people, I totally forgot, Not Without My Daughter, with Sally Field.
I didn't see that.
I forgot that one. Well, Sally Field played an American woman married to an Iranian man, and mind you, again, we talked about this earlier, I don't watch a lot of movies. Never watched this one, but I know the story.
All you gotta know is the clip.
So she marries an Iranian man. They go back to Iran to visit. And in Iran, if a woman wants to leave the country, she has to get written permission from her husband.
Got it.
So she can't just go on her own.
Got it.
Especially with a child. So the child thing is technically the same here as well. Like you can't. If you're not, you have to get permission from your spouse to take the kid out of the country. Sorry. So anyhow, so he ends up, I guess, becoming an abusive husband and doesn't want to come back to the States, wants to stay. And she ends up having to escape from Iran with her child. I think it was a girl. I can't remember. But she has to escape. And it's interesting. The route that she had to escape was the same route that, like, I had relatives who had to take to escape. So, but when that came out, then it was, you're oppressed. There was that view of like, we're oppressed and the men are abusive. And I mean, the little clips that I saw of that did not resonate with me at all. Like it was nothing. I mean, Iranian families, from what I have seen, are very matriarchal. Women are very, very strong. And yes, there are laws in Iran that are oppressive laws. Absolutely. I wouldn't deny that. But as far as the people and like for the majority, especially now in my experience, it hasn't been that way. Right.
Yeah.
So then there was that. Then it was Clueless. And then, then 300 and Prince of Persia and all those other movies started to come out to give this other different perspective. And then, Keeping Up with the Kardashians.
Oh my God.
Right. And then Shaws of Sunset. Are you familiar with Shaws of Sunset?
So that's funny. So I know someone who's Indian and she loves that stuff, but she wasn't born in India. I think she's Canadian, if I'm not mistaken. She loves the Kardashians, Shaws of Sunset. And I remember watching one episode of Shaws of Sunset. And you know me very well. So reality TV, for all those listeners, I don't like it at all. I like just in general the representation that it does, and we'll probably have another episode dedicated solely to how reality TV supports that stuff.
I do think that it's watching reality TV is almost like a clear example of how these stereotypes
100%
are self-fulfilling prophecies, like how they play some of these reality shows. They completely play into those roles.
It on a personal level, it disgusts me to see.
And I don't know them personally. Like, I don't know Kim or Chloe or any of them or the K's or the Shaws of Sunset folks. I don't know them personally. And I'll be honest with you, I've seen one episode of each my entire life. So I don't follow them. I don't, I have my own opinions about it. I think, the one episode of Keeping Up with the Kardashians that I saw was one years ago. Kim was being approached by Playboy to pose, and she didn't want to do any nude work. And her mom was like encouraging her to do it. And I just really felt bad for her. Like I felt like, she was an attractive person, and I felt like she wanted to be good. Like not to say that it's bad to be one way or the other, but she had her own like moral ground.
Correct.
But she couldn't follow it because of like the things that her mom was like encouraging her to do, and then being in that lifestyle. And oddly enough, we could talk about this later, but I just want to bring it up with this whole like Kanye becoming, don't roll your eyes at me, Kanye becoming religious thing. It's just kind of interesting, like how supportive she is of him, because I kind of feel like I think she does have this conservative side of her that was completely turned off because of, again, the stereotypes. What do you need to do? And hers, I don't think hers is a cultural thing, because if you know anything about Armenian culture, that nothing that they do really is Armenian culturally. right. But like, it goes to what I wanted to talk about a little later, but like the imagery of being a woman.
Correct. Yeah.
Right. It's a whole other conversation. Like I think the influences and stereotypes of femininity and being a woman were way stronger for me as an Iranian than any of the stereotypes, because we weren't very represented.
Correct.
Right? Like, so we weren't in every music video, and we weren't setting the bar of what was cool.
Yeah. Like, which is kind of good and bad. And I wanted to touch on something you mentioned where you said, you know, at these pivotal points, right? Clueless comes out and you're seen one way. Mm-hmm. Can remind me of the name of the movie with the lady that moves to.
Not without your daughter.
Not without my daughter. Not without my daughter.
Yeah.
Right. You're now seen a different way, and it's because, so people often say, like, well, I've had this sort of a conversation about imagery separate with other people just in general. Mm-hmm. And the folks that know me know that I'm very, 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 very critical of every role they cast a black person in and how that person is shown, because you don't see the opposite. So for you
don't see the balance.
There's no balance, right? It's all this one way, whether it's a reality TV show showing people being as absurd and ridiculous as they can possibly get them to be, right? Because they, you know, and you hear things about these reality shows, they're whispering in this person's ear off camera, whispering in that, you know, they stir the pot a lot, right?
Oh, absolutely.
And some of it clearly is scripted because people don't talk that way, but, but outside of that, my constant point to folks is, over time, everybody has this conversation about equality, whether it's race, whether it's gender, whether it's sexual preference, whatever. True equality means balance, right? It means 2 on one side and 2 on the other. It means 5 pounds on one side and 5 pounds on the other.
Agreed.
It means sun on one side and sun on the other. It is true balance. It is not balance where all of the shows that depict you, or in your case, the shows that depict you now, for Persia or the Middle East or that piece of the world, is Keeping Up with the Kardashians, Shahs of Sunset, and I don't know what else you have, right? Or what other representation you have. And then for African Americans,
we have Yara Shahidi. She's mixed.
But now it's hard because there's, like, you know, you have all these other examples of all these other shows, and people talk about all these other shows that are so great, but I can blindly pull any show and find, you know, a white person that's down in their luck and they're a drug addict and they're drunk and yada, yada, yada. But I can also look at any TV commercial and see a white doctor, a white dentist, a white lawyer, a white professor, a white judge, a white attorney, right? Like, there's so many other examples, right? Where their balance is there, where no one ever says, you fit this mold, because I see people on every side, whether you know them personally in life or whether it's something that you see on TV, right? It's that limited representation that changes how people perceive things. And I think the reality TV show, I actually think that that's a great example, because people tend to lean on that and say that, well, these are real people.
Right.
But I've seen an episode or two about, you know, all of the black ones, right? We got Love and Hip Hop and Basketball Wives and Atlanta Housewives. And I know a lot of black women that watch these shows, and I don't have any issue with it. I personally have an issue with it, but I don't have an issue with them watching it, because I understand that, just like with any show, watching a train wreck is always interesting. You cannot take your eyes off of a train derailing, going through a turn at 70 miles an hour and just rolling. It doesn't matter who it is, right? It is just awesome to see it. But what I do tell them, what we do engage in conversations, and some of them, they run the gamut. Some are just like, I'm absolutely clueless as to what you're saying. The others are just like, I completely get it. I would never participate in this.
Yeah.
And I don't I don't support it in the way of this is who we are. It's just more, I'm watching a train wreck. But the issue for me is how many positive images of Black women do you see on television actually handling this? Those roles are few and far between, and they struggle in those ways. And I know people are going to say the first one, and I'm going to come back to this, but people are going to say, what about Scandal?
I haven't seen it.
So Scandal is Kerry Washington, who was in the movie was in the Ray Charles movie with Jamie Foxx. And so she's this dynamic Black woman that knows all these folks in Washington, D.C. She's like a fixer, right? She can get you out of any problem. She has a whole team of people. She's as dominant can be. But guess what? The white president and his white wife, and I think they have a kid, she's having an affair with him.
Oh.
You see what I mean?
Yeah.
Instantaneously, all the credit, all her education, all her power, all her connection, everything now ties to infidelity, home wrecking, having an affair with a white guy, no less. Right? Takes away from that. Now, if you take that...
I mean, a white president.
I mean, obviously, it's got to be, right? So for me, I personally have an issue with that. How come she can't be standalone and be great and awesome and have nothing that takes away from her moral integrity? Sure. Now, if you go, and I know there are a couple other shows, Viola Davis has a show, et cetera, but a lot of times you'll find other groups or men of other colors involved with these women. And then the other thing is when you fast forward to the reality TV shows, what I've talked about is no matter how much money these Black women have, no matter what skill set they have, no matter what, if they have their own businesses or what, they still can't help but be extremely catty, fight, yell, curse, whatever, throw drinks, pull hair, be made up like, Barbie one day and a unicorn the next day and just all over the place. It's just not the representation of Black women that I think about when I think about Black women, right? And it's just hard to find the counter. I can find Kerry Washington, she's educated, but she's also having an affair with the president. Or I can find, some random Black woman way over here in left field. But kind of, but where does she sit on that spectrum? And so that's where, for me, where the perception piece of it kind of goes in a little bit more in depth, because now instead of creating roles in the traditional sense of television where we're going to cast you as, a mailman or cast you as, doing some other menial task. We're going to use reality TV as a new stepping off point to say, hey, you know what? These are real people.
Right.
These are real Persians. These are real Armenians. These are real Iranians.
I just want to clarify that I'm very clear that Keeping Up with the Kardashians, they don't represent Armenian people. Like they don't capitalize on that. I don't even think they talk about it. But I'm just want to make it clear before.
And that's the interesting thing, right? I know that you don't, but for people who are not that, right? For people that don't see that on a regular basis, for people that are think about how insulated people think about work. And how insulated people are.
Right.
I can go to work right now, go to our accounting department, and the Asians are all in their area, right? Chinese, Taiwanese, whatever, right? They eat together. They socialize together. They go back to neighborhoods where they live. Their schools that are are 99% Chinese, right? Or 99% Asian, right? They have a very insulated community. And I know we're going to talk in a different episode about segregation and social lines, but if you're that insulated and you're not out hanging out with you being an Iranian woman and learning about your culture and your history, hanging out with me, learning about my culture and history, there's no place else for me to pull from.
Right. I agree. And that's one reason why, it was so important for me to start the employee resource group at work to represent our communities and to just kind of share like, hey, we're different. We're not terrorists. We're not super religious. We're not all belly dancers. We're not.
Oh, I forgot about that one. That's a good one. That's a good one because I think that's all through the 90s in any movie where anybody traveled to the Middle East and went to like some nightclub. There were belly dancers everywhere.
Exactly. We're not
all
belly
hilarious.
Dancers. But yeah, just to kind of let people know like we're here and we've always been here and it wasn't a big deal because it really isn't a big deal.
Right.
We're just chilling. But I do want to go back to, I was looking up the name, Chandra Wilson.
Mm-hmm.
She's an actress on Grey's Anatomy. It's like one of the few shows that I do watch religiously. Mm-hmm. And she is an African-American woman married to a very good-looking, amazing character. I don't know him in real life, obviously, but his character is like everyone's, I think, dream guy. Black man. And she is the chief of surgery, or the chief of the hospital, now. And but I do appreciate the show about the show Grey's Anatomy, is probably why I still watch it, is that they really go out of their way to represent everyone.
Good.
In a positive way. I mean, there are the scandals, there are the affairs, but so far the affairs that I have seen have been primarily. Actually, no, everyone's participated. The black male, he was a chief of the hospital as well, but he had historically had an affair with another white surgeon, but mainly because she was a woman and he was a black guy, and so they were both the outcasts of the program.
Oh, gotcha.
Right.
Yeah.
And so, but it's just interesting, but her and her husband in the show are great representations. There are other African Americans in the show, but both of the other two that are both amazing as well. Very high integrity, just, beautiful inside and outside.
Yeah.
But in the show, they're mixed.
Yeah. But that's what I love to see.
I just wanted that.
Yeah.
They're the good. I don't want us to focus just on the negative stuff, but there are good things that are coming out, which is great for our kids.
Yes.
And but it's still a challenge because it's not the majority.
Correct.
Right. It's not the majority of media yet. It's not the majority of things. And
you have to find it. Right, you have to kind of look around and search around.
Yeah, I think you have to want it, right? So, their reality shows, I get the train wreck and it gets interesting. I started to watch 90 Day Fiance. I mean,
I've heard about
and
that.
I loved it and I hated it at the same time. But I just realized I don't like to see people struggling.
Just in general.
It's in general. Yeah. It makes me, I like it, but I'm just I don't want to feel it anymore. There's enough stress and anxiety in real life. I don't need to add to it through, I'm a sensitive person apparently, but I don't need to add to it through my leisurely time, right? So with reality TV, right? These are supposedly real people. At least with TV, written shows and dramas, I can distinguish that it's just a show, right?
Right. But
it's supposed to be real.
This tries to push people towards this is what actually happened.
Right. Exactly. Even though I know it's exaggerated.
And to be clear, and just one thing to clear up, because people are well, if you don't watch the show, I know a ton of people that watch this sort of stuff. Yeah. I get all the cliff notes. There's not you need to see it. No, you don't. You just need to know somebody who watches it all the time and just look, this is the type of shit that they do on this show, and you already know what it's about. Yeah. It's I don't need to watch 15 episodes of Love and Hip Hop to know what it's about. It's about watching black folks catfight.
Oh, okay.
And people with a lot of money catfight. You know what I mean? Yes, there's some other people. Yeah. Oh, I'm trying to get my career off the ground. I want to be a singer. Same thing with but that's what it is at the end. The reality shows us to build and feed the train wreck. It's to add fuel to the speeding train. For all of them, let's not isolate. I don't want to isolate Keeping Up with the Kardashians and isolate the black ones.
That's
for all of
them.
There's just ones we know, but for all Orange County and the one they have in New York and the New Jersey folks that did their reality show, it's all the same. It's all the same.
So how would you say that knowing these things, because we talked about, I could talk about the issues that the images of being a woman, how that's impacted me.
We got to cover that one. Yeah, we got to cover that one.
We could talk about that.
I really want to talk about that too.
But how do you feel these stereotypes have impacted you as a black man growing in the United States? What were some of the struggles or things that you had to realize or overcome or are still need to realize or still working on?
I mean, I can... probably in 3 words, the hardest thing to overcome is that I'm intelligent. And that's really what it boils down for me at the end of the day, right? If you assume that I'm intelligent, then there is no, you must be a criminal. There is no, like the hoodie thing was always a big thing, right? When we talk about the, Trayvon Martin and some of the other folks that have been gunned down, there are plenty. I can go to UC Berkeley right now, and there are 1,000, 2,000, 5,000 kids with hoodies on walking around. Yeah. No one says anything. It says Cal on the front of it, so you must be smart. Right. If I wear it, it's a different thing depending on where I am, right? So for me, it's the impact is that what you wear, what your facial hair looks like, if you have tattoos, what environment they see you in, right? You must not be. Right? You can't be. Right. Right? So for the 2 gentlemen that got kicked out of the Starbucks. Oh gosh, yeah. They were dressed casually. Yeah. But I can go to the YouTube building, the Google building, the Facebook building. Everybody is dressed the same way. Yeah. The developers there that are making $200,000, $300,000, $400,000 a year are dressed the same way that those 2 gentlemen are. But it can't be. Right. Right? So for me, the struggle is, you can't be smart. You can't be intelligent. You can't be a valuable representation of a black man. You can't be a good father. You can't be, because A, that's not the image I've seen. Mm-hmm. B, it's a self-fulfilling prophecy. I don't want to believe that. I've seen Obama, because they'll be I voted for Obama. You've seen Obama. You've seen countless other examples of black folks in Congress, on the news, whether they're Elijah Cummings, Malcolm X, Martin Luther King. Whether you can go even further back. You can even go further back. Yeah. But those are all outliers. Mm. It's not the everyday black man that's that. It's the Obama is just one. You can only have one black president. Obama's just the one. That's it. For the rest of our life, we're done. Your orator, that's MLK, because I didn't like the ideas of Malcolm X, so we don't count him. Right. Right. So, you know what I mean? Like, he's violent and et cetera, even though that wasn't his message. Not at all. At all. Right. So for me, the biggest thing I struggle with is that I'm intelligent and that I can't be something better than what you think that I am or should be, based on television, based on wherever you're drawing from. Right. Right. What about you? I think for me as a woman, it's mostly as a woman, because I think being Iranian from a young age, well, I guess, I can tell you this. So from a young age, we're pretty much told that we're going to either need to be doctors, lawyers, or engineers. That's it. So for me... Kudos to your culture for that, though. Kudos to my culture. But what it has done, it has made me very insecure. Because you're not that. I'm not any of those things. Right? So does that mean that I'm not good enough because I'm none of those things? Right. I'm not... I don't have a master's degree, so... Yeah. Who cares about how much success I've had in my life, and who cares about all of the things that I've accomplished or what type of human being I am or whatever. I don't have those things, so I sometimes feel small when I'm in my community. Like, I'm not good enough. Maybe I shouldn't say anything. Maybe I should just kind of so for me as an Iranian, that's kind of been my challenge that I've had to overcome. And oddly enough, one way I've overcome it is by surrounding myself with people who are those things and realizing, I'm good. And that's funny. I'm doing all right. I'm doing all right. I'm good. And that's why that's part of our tagline for our podcast, right? When I surround myself with doctors and lawyers and attorneys and other folks that are high up there, and the same thing for me too. I know lawyers and heads of business and finance VPs, et cetera, we're not so different. We're not so different. Right? Very true. Very true. But as a woman, I feel like a lot of the challenges is one, because I was outgoing and cute and sassy in a flirty kind of way. Mm-hmm. When I was younger, people were surprised that I was smart. Right. And that was offensive to me. Yeah. Just the whole being objectified and things like that. That those were the biggest. Those, I think, had a lot more impact for me. I see what you mean, yeah. And I can see that, too. Just kind of obsessing over the looks of it all, right? So, but at the end of the day, I think the most important thing is that,
taking that time to self-reflect and working through all of those things and recognizing it so that we can do better for other people,
right,
and for the next generation and for our kids,
right.
So,
and that's what we're doing here, right?
Yeah.
Counter the notion of culture ignorance.
Yeah.
Right, through intellectual candor, and that's exactly that. It's like you have to fight those things simply through conversation. So when someone engages me or engages you, either you as a good looking woman and saying, oh, you must be this and you must be that, right? Or me as a black man and oh, you have a hoodie on today and you're going shopping in a store that sells, whatever, and I think it's too expensive for you. Right. You just engage them on a different level.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's what we're here for. And just to remind everyone that we're not so different.
We're not so different. Thank you all for listening. Feel free to give us shouts out at our email address. Again, that's wnsdifferent@gmail.com. We'd love to hear your feedback as well as your ideas.
Thanks a lot. It was nice chatting with you.
Always.
Talk to you.